So let's dive right into this explainer because we are looking at a really fascinating, seemingly empty void on our global flight maps. If you're anything like me and you love tracking flights on your phone, or maybe you just casually glance at those in-flight route monitors when you're traveling between Europe and Asia, you've probably noticed a pretty massive anomaly. You'll see literally hundreds of planes taking these huge, sweeping detours just to avoid a piece of land roughly the size of Western Europe. We're talking about the airspace over Tibet. And honestly, it looks super suspicious on a map, almost like it's a restricted military zone or some top-secret no-fly area. Which really makes you wonder, is it a conspiracy or is it something else entirely? Naturally, a massive blank space like that has sparked a ton of wild internet rumors. People see this huge void on the radar and, well, imaginations tend to run wild with ideas about secret bases or hidden government agendas. But today, we're cutting through all that hearsay. We're going to break this down analytically to figure out if we're looking at a conspiracy or if it's honestly just extreme geography smashing right into the absolute non-negotiable rules of modern aviation. Because, spoiler alert, the real logistics behind commercial flying are actually way more fascinating than any wild internet theory. Okay, so the very root of this whole aviation puzzle comes down to sheer mind-boggling scale. The Tibetan Plateau is widely known as the roof of the world. And guys, that is not just some catchy marketing slogan for a tourist brochure. This region is a massive, sprawling, elevated plain, and it is completely boxed in by the towering Himalayan mountains, which, of course, includes Mount Everest, literally the tallest mountain on the planet. Geographically speaking, these ranges create one of the most uncompromisingly brutal environments for an airplane anywhere on Earth. Now get this number in your head for a second, 14,800. That is the average elevation of the Tibetan Plateau, in feet above sea level. Just let that sink in. Entire countries, massive coastal cities, millions and millions of people exist right at 0 feet. But this colossal expanse of rock and ice, its baseline starts at nearly 15,000 feet up in the sky, and that starting height totally rewrites the rules for atmospheric pressure, air density, and the crucial safety margins that airplanes absolutely rely on. Think about it like this. Modern commercial jets usually cruise along quite comfortably in the stratosphere, generally somewhere between 35,000 and 40,000 feet. Now, if you're flying over, say, Kansas or France, that altitude gives you an absolutely massive cushion of empty air between you and the ground. But over Tibet, the terrain was so extreme that the jagged mountain peaks are routinely scraping the sky at over 20,000 feet. So that nice, comfortable safety cushion, it's suddenly sliced right in half. And in aviation, when you slash a margin of error like that, you fundamentally change how a flight has to operate. And that dramatically smaller gap of air leads us directly to a really serious mechanical issue, the emergency descent protocol. If a commercial cabin ever loses pressure, pilots are trained to immediately execute a rapid descent, often called a drift-down procedure. The goal is to dive the plane down to exactly 10,000 feet. Why 10,000? Because at that specific altitude, the outside air is finally dense enough and packed with enough oxygen for passengers to just breathe normally, without needing those Euro supplemental oxygen masks. Over 99% of the world, this emergency drop is super straightforward. Cabin depressurizes, you dive to 10,000 feet, everyone breathes fine, and the flight crew calmly plans their next move knowing there's plenty of flat ground safely below them. But over Tibet, the ground is literally in your way. When the solid granite below you is sitting at 15,000 to 20,000 feet, dropping down to 10,000 feet to find breathable air isn't just hard, it is a physical impossibility. And, cabin pressure is really just one piece of the puzzle here. What happens if you run into a totally different kind of emergency and you actually just need to put the plane on the ground? Flying is incredibly safe, we all know that, but unexpected diversions are a very real part of the job. Whether it's a severe medical emergency in row 12, a sudden engine issue, or some other technical glitch, sometimes you just need a runway, and you need it fast. The catch is, a wide-body jet carrying hundreds of people can't just land anywhere. It needs an incredibly long, highly equipped runway, complete with robust emergency services waiting on the tarmac. Tibet's infrastructure just simply isn't built to support massive international airliners dropping in out of the blue. So trying to find a safe, properly equipped airport in a pinch over the plateau, practically impossible. It takes what would be a routine flight diversion anywhere else and turns it into a total logistical nightmare. And oh boy, as if the extreme elevation and a total lack of giant runways weren't enough to deal with, the Himalayas themselves are like a weather factory on overdrive. We are talking about relentless wind shears, brutal clear air turbulence, and these powerful things called mountain waves, which are massive currents of air that can physically push a giant aircraft around. Throw in some sudden, wildly unpredictable storms, and you can see why this environment is a pilot's worst nightmare. Airlines prioritize safety and comfort above everything else, and this volatile weather heavily stacks the deck against them. So, when you add all of those compounding factors together, it makes total sense why this incredibly stubborn myth popped up online. The idea that planes never ever fly over Tibet. People state it like it's some undeniable absolute law of modern aviation, usually throwing in a dramatic, empty radar map to prove their point. But hey, we've laid out the geographic and mechanical facts, so it's time to test that theory against actual industry practices and bust this myth wide open. Because here is the reality check. Yes, they absolutely do fly over it. Now sure, the skies over Tibet aren't exactly a highway packed bumper to bumper with commercial holiday jets, but the idea that it's a complete void is just false. Military aircraft, specialized cargo runners, and even a few specific commercial routes actually do cross parts of the plateau. But to pull it off safely, those specific planes have to be heavily modified with extended capacity passenger oxygen systems. That way, if they lose pressure, everyone can survive the prolonged time at high altitude, while the pilot carefully navigates a maze of mountains to find a safe way down. You see, airlines aren't just taking a ruler, drawing a straight line between two cities, and hitting autopilot. Route planning is an incredibly rigid, complex calculus. It's a massive balancing act weighing fuel efficiency, shifting weather systems, complex global air traffic, and crucially, those available emergency airports. Even if a straight shot right over Mount Everest looks way faster on your screen, the absolute safest, most practical move is almost always to just fly around the whole region. Every single operational safety box has to be checked. So, at the end of the day, that giant void on your flight radar, it isn't some shadowy government conspiracy or a secret restricted zone. It's literally just the roof of the world colliding head-on with uncompromising aviation safety protocols. The mountains are simply too high, the air is too thin, the emergency landing spots are way too sparse, and the weather is far too chaotic for airlines to ever risk your safety just to shave a few minutes off of flight time. So the next time you're sitting on a flight, sipping a coffee at 35,000 feet and looking out the window, think about all the invisible safety nets your pilot is actively using to protect you. Every twist, every turn, and every massive detour on that route has been painstakingly calculated to expertly dodge hidden geographic and atmospheric dangers that you might not even know are down there. It really makes you appreciate the incredible, unseen puzzle being solved right above the clouds, doesn't it?